I meant to do. Um, I hit the wrong button. Maybe I was saying something I shouldn't. um, in 1 Corinthians 14, Paul's talking about prophecy and science, speaking in tongues, and I believe the idea there of prophesying is to proclaim truth. I think what Paul is saying is, in that context, that women are not to be teaching in the churches. He's not talking about speaking, because earlier he encourages women to speak in the church, through in prayer at least, and certainly in fellowship. Both, everyone's talking to each other. So I think in 1 Corinthians 14, the idea is that women are not to be in a role of teaching, at least mixed groups, and that's what 1 Timothy 2 talks about as well. Is that. So I don't know where all of you are at on that particular issue, but and I don't mean to get into any sort of controversy here, but I just wanted to at least talk about this idea of silent, because I've heard that word used and it's been abusive, where preachers said, okay, women, you can't say a word in church. And we have a dear woman with us. Okay, Dwayne. But that's not what it means. It could mean that if you just took that one sentence out and took it out of its context, then you can make it say that. But that's not what Paul meant. He was talking about in a certain circumstance, when it comes to teaching within the church. And again, with a mixed group, because Paul says later in Titus that older women are to instruct younger women. Now, certainly that includes teaching, and that includes speaking. So I don't think Paul is condemning or commanding women not to say a word at all within the churches. I think it's this idea of teaching and instruction that he is saying should not be done. But we have to be careful. It's easy to take a word or a sentence and make it say what we want. All right, but in this case, we not only would we be misinterpreting Paul if we did that in this sentence, we would also be doing much harm to women in the churches if we were to say, okay, you can't talk at all. We would be doing them harm. We would be restricting the work of the Spirit through half the congregation. How could you minister if you couldn't speak? I mean, it's crazy. So the implications or the result of that kind of error are significant in the life of a church. Just by taking that one word out of context, you can do great damage. And so I'm just reinforcing the principle I've stated several times already this evening, but I want to make sure it comes home, because this happens quite often. Another example in 1 John chapter 4, there is no fear in love. Perfect love casts out fear. What did John mean by that? Now, if you just take that statement, you can make it to mean, if I just love people, then I won't be afraid anymore. But if we look in the context, when John uses this word love, he's speaking of the love of God for us. Just go back and read the whole chapter. And the fear he's talking about is the fear of hell. Punishment. He even says it here in this sentence. So what he's talking about is there's no fear in love. What that means is when I am confident in God's love for me, I have no fear that I'm going to be punished. That's what he's talking about here in this context. But you have to read the whole chapter to understand that. The focus here is on the love of God, and the fear being talked about is this fear of judgment, fear of punishment. So there are a couple other examples. I'll put them in your notes. But again, the context is what is going to provide understanding of particular words within a passage. All right. Okay. Whoops. I have the wrong font size here. Any questions on that? all the fallacies we talked about, the importance of context. Just want to make sure before we move on. Okay. Very good. Let's talk about now, okay, what is the process then? How do I go about conducting a word study? All right. Now I'm going to need to change the font here a little bit. So give me a second to do that. Here. Sorry, let me take care of this first, and then we'll come back to it. All right. Oh, I need to open that file. So yeah, if you need to take a 1-minute stretch break or something, go ahead and do that. Well,
Pastor Tim.
Yes.
During this time, I mean, there are some big words, I guess, that keep reoccurring, right? I mean, in our different contexts. In the States, it might be words that are used again and again. In Malaysia, it might be, words like depression, hopeless. I don't know. These are things that people read. Would that be a good way to, I guess, minister to somebody, to start with those words and then try to show them what it means in the Bible, rather than, again, what it means in the secular context, right? And kind of share a mini sermon, I guess, that way. Well, or rather, yeah, counsel somebody, right? From the word that they understand, right? From the newspapers, but then to kind of show them that this is how this word is used in the Bible, right? And then, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think certainly, certainly we don't want what the culture determines or says something means. We want, what does the scripture tell us or say that means? And so, what would be an example? I don't know. Do you have one? You mentioned a couple. Hopelessness, you said, or what was that?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays it's usually just disaster, government incompetence thing. All these are just words that are, I guess, floating to the top of most people's vocab right now. So, but how can we, I guess, be relevant to people, but yet um, show them that the understanding of that word can actually give hope. I mean, with the right understanding of that word can actually give hope, right? And we can be skillful about that. Yeah, I mean, even in Myanmar right now, yeah, I find it sometimes hard that people can even listen to a whole sermon, right? And I guess if there can be just a right view about one word, is very hopeful, I think. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you want to, people need a biblical understanding of things like, yeah, maybe words like despair or depression. I think you mentioned that earlier, that, or even addiction. Does the Bible have terminology like addiction? Are we addicted? I think Pastor Dwayne in his prayer tonight, the freedom from slavery to sin. Addiction is a slavery. Now, is a Christian a slave to sin? Well, the Bible, Paul tells us in Romans that he's not no longer slave to sin. He's freed from it. But we do struggle and sometimes live as if we were slaves to sin. So, but because of the power of the Spirit at work in us, we do not have to be enslaved to sin. So the word addiction, we have to be careful when we use it for a Christian. If we're using it in the sense of that a struggle, that I struggle with alcohol, that it's a great temptation for me that I sometimes give into, that's one thing. But if we say, I have to have alcohol, I cannot escape. Well, a Christian should never say that about anything. He's not mastered by anything, but it can feel that way. And so the terminology we use, we do have to be careful and not let the culture determine or dictate truth, but the scripture. So I'm not sure if that's what you were getting at, Paul, but
Yeah, I think you're right, absolutely right. I mean, I think we can talk to so-called cultural Christians to just get a feel what are the kind of like the top words running around in people's head right now. Yeah, uncertainties, like and yeah, despair, hope for the best, and of course, a lot of these words they have a secular, cultural view of it, and those I think are opportunities. I wonder how to get into conversations where we can show from scripture that word actually means such and such, rather than the way you seem to be using it. Yeah. So anyway, just thought, I mean, I enjoy word studies, but I'm just thinking in our current context, I think it is so helpful if and practical, I guess.
yeah, I think that that's definitely something that we have to keep in mind, or just the words we use even as well, that we are careful about using biblical terminology rather than what's been determined by the culture. Okay, let me just quickly here go through the process of doing word studies, and then next time when we gather next week, by the way, just to schedule here, let me do this while I'm thinking about it, otherwise I'll forget. our schedule here, I made one little change. Next week, the plan is to gather. I think originally I had that as a discipleship lab, but my schedule has changed. So next week we'll have one more session together, and then the following week, July 27, will be discipleship lab. And then the week after that, no class. So that'll give you time to catch up on your assignments as well. So next week we will be gathering, Lord willing, and do the next session. And then the 2 weeks after that, there won't be class. We'll have discipleship lab on the 27th, which is 2 weeks from tonight. And then there'll be no class on the 3rd of August. Okay, and then we'll be back together for session 7 in August. And notice we're getting close, guys, to going through this 3rd session. So we're making progress here, all right? So just stay with it. But just wanted to point that out to you. And then as well on Canvas, I've assigned a particular passage to you a few weeks ago. Just want to remind you of that for your assignments, let's see, from assignment number 3.3 and on, so 3.3, 4, 5, these are all going to be from your assigned passage. So you will do these assignments, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5. All of those will be done for your assigned passage, all right, which is here. And you can take note of that, or if you look on Canvas, I put in the notes your assigned passage as well. So you can find the schedule and the passage as well, all right? So just, again, we'll be gathering together next week. and then taking, we won't be gathering the next 2 weeks after that. All right. Okay. All right. So next week when we gather, we'll go through an example together of a word study, but I want to just at least show you the process tonight, and then we'll come. Oh, Kaptuk, sorry. I will assign you a passage as well. I'll do that right now, in fact. Thank you, Pastor Philip, for reminding me. I always forget. So, Kaptuk, you will be Colossians 3:15-17. Okay, that will be your passage. Thank you, Pastor Philip, for letting me know. Okay. So Kaptuk, Colossians 3:15-17. All right. Now, significant words. How do you identify significant words in your passage? That's the first step. When you're doing a word study, you want to identify, okay, what words do I need to look at? I'm sorry, Kaptuk, did you have a question? Okay. How do you identify?
Hello.
Did you have a question, Kaptuk? You look puzzled. Everything okay?
Chanyan, Megonshi Badala. So, Pastor, it seems his connection is frozen.
Maybe you can explain to him a little later, Pastor Philip.
Yes, I will. Definitely.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm sorry I left his name off of the list. Okay. All right. The word study process. Let's just take another 10 minutes or so, and then I'll let you go. The first step in doing a word study is to identify the significant words. Kaptuk said he can't hear. Something wrong with his. Let me just write him a quick note here. Okay. How do you identify what is a key word? We could do a word study on every word in the passage, but that would not only take a very long time to do, but honestly, it won't give you that much help. Now, there are a few words, though, that would be important to identify and do a word study on. So let me ask you first, you guys, how would we identify a key word to study? What would be something that would tell us the word is significant, that we should study it?
Repeated word.
Repeated words, yes, definitely. In fact, I just pulled up a passage here from 2 Corinthians. I won't read the whole text, but I just want you, I'm going to highlight a particular word that we see here. Notice comfort, comforts, comfort, comfort. I think that word appears several times. Comfort. You see all that Paul keeps repeating that idea. Or even as well, another word he repeats in this context. This is a passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, is affliction, affliction, afflicted, suffering, suffering, affliction, sufferings. Up, I see comforted again. Okay, so if you were studying this passage, certainly the words comfort, affliction, and suffering, you would do a word study on. Because this is a word that seems to be very important to Paul here, and he repeats it over and over and over again. All right, so repeated words. Any other, how do we identify? What are some other key words? Or how would we identify other key words?
Can we say conjunctions? Like for example, like the word for.
Yeah, now conjunctions like for or and or but or yeah, it could be depending on how it's used. If it seems to be in a key place within the sentence, you may want to look at that. Okay. Any others?
Maybe the verb.
Yeah. I'll call them key verbs. Yeah, verbs drive the action here. So like, for example, there is the verb form of comfort in this passage that's given. So key verbs, especially maybe the main verb, or we talked about the independent clause. What's the verb in that independent clause? That's a key word in the sentence. Okay, good. Any other words that we would want to look at? Any others that come to mind? Sometimes you might just come across a word that's unclear or puzzling. You know, maybe the translation is just like, what does that word mean? I've never seen that word before, or that's a confusing word. Doesn't make sense here. So that would be a word you would want to look up. Maybe words that are translated differently. All right, so if you're looking at the different versions, and you see that a particular word is translated in a different way, maybe that's a word that you're going to want to do a word study on, because the translations have a different idea, and that happens from time to time. Any others? How do we identify keywords? Any other ideas?
It depends on the mood.
Depends on the mood. So, what do you mean by
If
that?
that sentence is, if the sentence, especially when the mood is let's say imperative, like a comment.
Oh,
Comment.
okay. And we're talking about verb in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, when we're looking at, especially when we're looking at the key verbs, that's going to be an important part. Is it given as a command, or is the word given as a statement or a question? All right, good. Maybe words that just seem interesting to you. All right, maybe you just want to do a word study on a particular word. That's fine as well. But I think especially these first five are good reasons to look for. I might even probably prioritize it this way. These four, you definitely want to identify repeated words or key verbs, words that are translated differently. Those would be the priority to look for. All right. But again, you can study any word you want. There's no restriction at all. But you really want to be strategic, be thoughtful about the words you choose, because we only have a limited amount of time to do our study. And so we want to pick key words to choose. Now, the next step then, after you identify the word or words that you want to study, is let's now look for what are the lexical definitions of what are the possible meanings of that word in its original language. Now, there are many tools we can use to do this. What I like to do here is there's an online tool that I found very helpful. There's actually 3, but I use Bible Hub the most. If we go to BibleHub.com, so I'm going to take you there. All right. If you have access, can use the internet here. BibleHub.com. Okay, let me, whoops. All right, there we go. We're going to use this, or I'm going to recommend this site quite often. It's got many helpful features to them. And what I want to do here is just show you one very important feature. Okay, you're at BibleHub.com. Look for where it says interlin. That refers to interlinear. Okay, I'm going to hit that, interlinear, and then let's say we were studying, we're looking up, let's say we were studying that 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians passage that we just read, or that I referred to a moment ago. So I type in the passage, 2 Corinthians 1, and now notice here, we've got lots of stuff going on. Look at what's going on. This is called an interlinear. All right, if those of you who haven't seen this before, in the middle line here, the largest font is the Greek text. Okay, so if I'm looking at 2 Corinthians 3, chapter 1, verse 3, the middle line is the Greek, the actual Greek text. Now, right below that middle line is the literal definition that the interlinear publisher put. So this is one of the definitions of the word that the translator here, the one that's written this interlinear, has decided on. Okay, that doesn't mean it's the definition. It could be that's the one they chose, and they just put a literal definition of each word under the Greek word. So Norman mentioned conjunctions. Well, the Greek word kai is the conjunction. Usually it means and. Sometimes it can mean but or also. All right, so here we can find, if we find the English word underneath, that can show us where the Greek word. So here, comfort was one we were interested in, right? The God of all comfort. So it's this Greek word. Now, how do we say this Greek word? Where that is the word above it. Paraklesios. All right, if you wanted to know how to pronounce it. All right, that's the word above it. And then there's a number above that. This is the key. This is what I wanted to show you. So we can go to the interlinear. The interlinear will allow us to find the word in Greek. Even if we don't know Greek, we can go and, there's the word comfort in verse 3. That's the word I was interested in. Okay, it's this Greek word, paraklesios. All right, fine. Now, klesios. Now, notice this number above that. You guys see that number? 3874. That's called the Strong's number. All right. Now, there was a man named, was it William? I think W.H. Strong, way back in the late 1800s, who went through the King James Version of the Bible, and he noted every single word used in the Bible, how many times it was used, and where it was used. It's an amazing accomplishment. He didn't have computers, all right? So he, by hand, went through the Bible and just noted, okay, the word comfort, for example, he would identify how many times is the English word comfort used in the King James. And he would write all those references. I don't have mine with me. It's an amazing work, really. So what happened is he would look up, he would identify a word and give it a number. So here, this word for comfort, parakleseos, is the Strong's number 3874. So let's punch that. So I just clicked it. Okay, here it is. This is the root word for comfort in Greek. And notice here now, there's a bunch of information. All right. The Strong's Concordance. All right. That's again, the man's name Strong. It's called a concordance that has the reference. So you can find every passage that this word paraklesis is used in the New Testament. All right. So notice on the left, there's some definitions here, okay, that are given. So that's what we're looking for initially, is finding the definitions of the word. Here's the different ways that the word is translated in the New American Standard Bible, okay, which is appeal, comfort, consolation. So these are the different English words that are given for this Greek word. All right, so here's a definition: a calling to one's aid, encouragement, comfort. It's used in these ways in the New American Standard Bible. Okay, now notice, you guys see this lexicon? You guys all see that? Again, when you see the word lexicon, just think dictionary. Here are the various possible meanings of the word paraklesis. All right, so it got one meaning, calling near, summons. Another meaning, possible meaning, imploration, supplication, entreaty, to ask. Another meaning, exhortation, admonition, encouragement, consolation, comfort, solace. All right, so we've got here 5 possible meanings of the Greek word from this lexicon. In this step, that's what you want to identify. Just find the possible meanings of the word, okay? We have 1 definition from the New American Standard Concordance. We have 5 definitions from the Thayer's Greek lexicon. Thayer is just the name of an older Greek scholar. All right, and then we have a couple of definitions given by this website. Okay, so just note that in the second step. You're just looking for possible meanings. All right, you've identified your keyword in the first step. The second step, you go to the Bible Hub and look at your passage, find the word. So we're looking for the word comfort here, and then go to the Strong's number and hit that, and then you get all of this come up. Okay? And there's a lot of helpful information here. Okay, so that is the second step, is find the lexical definitions. All right, any questions there? There's 2 other websites that you can use that have a similar, that also have interlinear and you can do this and have word studies. blueletterbible.org. It's a helpful website. And these are in your notes, by the way, so you'll have this. Another is BibleStudyTools.com. All right, and I put information here how you can get to looking up the words. All right, so these tools allow us to actually look at the Greek words and give us some insights into the possible meanings of those Greek words, okay? I like BibleHub.com the most. I think it's the easiest to use, and it's helpful in some other ways that I'll show you later on. All right, but any of these other ones, Blue Letter Bible or BibleStudyTools.com, or if you have, some of you may have an interlinear, you may already have Bible software that you can use as well. But if you don't, these can be very helpful websites for you. All right. Now, the third step. So the first step, identify the keywords. The second step is then go to the interlinear find the original Greek word and look up the Strong's number so that you can get the lexical definitions of that word. A third step is then, how is that word translated in other English translations? And here I've picked 5 good English translations that you can consult if you have access to them. And by the way, BibleHub.com, you will have access to these 4 translations. If you go to Bible Hub, I can show you that real quick. There's many online tools that have different translations, but if you're already using Bible Hub, we can go back to, let's go back to the, okay, up at the top, notice all of these here, these are all Bible translations in the white letters. So we have NIV, New Living, ESV, New King James, New American Standard, the Christian Standard Bible, that's the Southern Baptist version, Holman. Okay, so you can use any of these translations just from Bible Hub. So if I want to look at the New King James Version, I just hit that, and here it is, 2 Corinthians 1 from New King James. So let's say, now I want to check the ESV. Okay, here's the ESV version. All right, so that's another place you can get access to the different translations. And what you want to do in this third step is just look at, how is this word translated in the other translations? Are there any significant differences to that word? All right, and we'll look at an example next week. The fourth step then is to identify, how is the word used in other passages? All right, let's go back to Bible Hub for a minute. All right, here's my Bible Hub. I'm gonna go back to 2 Corinthians 1. I'm gonna hit interlinear. And go back to that word. It'll let me. Oh, by the way, sometimes if you go to interlinear, it'll just have one verse. Just hit click for the chapter and it'll give you the interlinear for the whole chapter. I go to verse 3. Where's my word? Comfort. There's my word again, comfort. And my Strong's number. I'm going to hit that. Not only does it give you the lexical definitions here on the left, notice on the right, it gives you the verses, other verses that the word appears in. You guys see that? From Luke, from Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians. And look, there's lots of verses. It's used quite often. See that? 29 occurrences of the word. Now, on this fourth step, what you're going to do is look at how the word is used in these other passages. All right, so I go to Philippians. How does the word used there? 2 Corinthians 8. All right, so you're going to go to these other passages to look up how the word is used. Now, just in closing tonight, let me explain what we want to do then is maybe let's say like here, look at how many. We're given 29 occurrences. That's quite a few. Some words, it's even more. Now, do we look up all 29 of those passages? And you don't have to do that. All right, that would be a lot of work. Sometimes you may want to do that, but let's say you have a word that's used 100 times. You're going to look up all 100 passages? You can, but what's maybe a better way to approach this is what we call the circles of context. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. The circles of context are, here's a picture. All right, let's say the center represents the word you're looking at. Now, ideally, what we should do is, okay, look for that word being used in its immediate context. In other words, is that word found anywhere else in the same book? All right, notice immediate context. That's like, is it found elsewhere in the same paragraph? Yes, and comfort is in 2 Corinthians. Then look in the same book. Is that word used elsewhere in the book? it's likely that the author is using that word in the same way in his book and other places. All right. So the place to start is first, is that word used anywhere else nearby in the same paragraph or immediate paragraph? Then look for, is that same word used in the book that I'm studying? So if I'm looking at comfort, does Paul use comfort anywhere else in 2 Corinthians? And he does. He uses it several other places. So I want to look up those first because it's likely Paul is using the word in the same way. Not always, but that's likely. Okay. Then I would look at, okay, does Paul use this word in any other of his letters? Because again, a person will typically use a word in the same way. Again, not always, but it's more likely. So what I'm showing you here is if you have a word that's repeated, used 50 times in the Bible, you won't have time to look up all 50 of those, but you can just take the first 10 by looking for the word in its immediate context, then look for the word within the same book, then look for the word used by the same author. All right. And then the next circle of context would be if that word's used in the same kind of book, other epistles, and then the New Testament. Okay, so this is my strategy. If I find a word that's used, a lot, I'll just take the first 10 passages that I find it in, starting with the immediate context, then going to the rest of the book that the word is found in, then going to the same author and other book. I'll show you, we'll go through an example from Philemon where I'll show this to you. So right now I'm just exposing you to the idea. So this is the idea of the circle of context. And we want to look up the word, how it's used in other passages, starting with those nearest to it in the way of context. All right. So if we're looking at that word comfort, say in 2 Corinthians 1:3, we first want to look at, is the word used elsewhere, say in verses 1 to 15. That's the immediate context. And then you would ask, okay, is the word used elsewhere in 2 Corinthians? All right, that's the same book. Then you would ask next, okay, let's say I find 4 verses where it's used in the book. Then I ask, is the word used elsewhere in by the same author? Okay, so that would be other Pauline epistles. Does he use the word comfort, the Greek word for comfort? Then you would ask, is the same word used elsewhere in the same genre? So maybe in this case, it's epistles. So does Peter use the word? James, the other writers of the epistles? Because again, that word will likely be used similarly in the same genre. And then you would ask, is the word used elsewhere in the New Testament? Okay. But let's say that you find 10 uses of the word just by looking in the same book. Okay, that would be enough. You're just basically looking for, if you don't want to look up all 29 occurrences, then just start with the ones closest to it in the immediate context, then look at the word used in the book and so on. All right, that's what I'm describing here. Because the concept is the word is most likely going to mean the same thing the closer it is in the context, either in the paragraph that it's in the book that it's in, or even used by the same author in other books. All right, then one more, actually 2 more steps. One more is to consult other resources, other maybe commentaries, word study books, and then finally summarize the meaning of the word in the context of the passage in a sentence or 2. So take all the information that you've gathered, the lexical definitions, the use of the word in other passages, how the word is translated in different translations, information from other resources. Collect all that together and state the meaning of the word in your own words and a summary. All right. Okay, but that's enough, I think, for tonight. That's the process. We will begin, Lord willing, next week. The course will go through a passage in Philemon using this process, and I'll show you how to do it so that you'll have the format to use for when you do a word study in your assigned passage from Colossians. All right. But it's those 5 steps. First, identify the key words. All right, and we talked about how to do that. Second, find the lexical definitions of the word. And again, you can use an interlinear, BibleHub.com or some of those other to do that. The third step is into find the how the word is translated in different translations. And I would again encourage you, the ones that I mentioned. The fourth step is how is the word used elsewhere in the Bible? And again, the fifth would be to consult other resources, other word study books, commentaries. And then the sixth step is to summarize. All right. All right. So if you want to try this out on your own this week, and just pick a word from a passage you're studying right now, go through this process and just practice. And if you have any questions, let me know. All right. So those are the steps to do a word study. And like I said in the summary, again, what does the word mean in its context? That's the question you're trying to answer. And again, this part is the most important. All right. Okay. Well, I've tortured you enough tonight, so I'll let you go get some rest. Unless there's any final questions from you guys. We had an update from Pastor Philip on here. Let me do this.